Welcome to the Medical Device Made Easy podcast. Here is Munir Al-Azouzi from easymedicaldevice.com. And today we wanted to have an episode where we will talk about the new release of the MDCG guidance related to the PRRC. So we'll know more about that in a few minutes. And for that, I have with me a guest, which is Erik Vollebregt, who is a lawyer at the firm Axon Lawyers. So Erik, welcome to the Medical Device Made Easy podcast.
I'm Munir. Nice for having me again. I'm broadcasting live from my, as you can see, quite messy home office. I'm always in the project of cleaning it.
As I said, so real life, real people. So we have real experts that are really helping us. So thank you for being here and thank you for helping us on this episode. So as I've said, so we will talk now about the new release of the guidance related to the PRRC. So, Erik, let's help the audience to understand first what is a PRRC, and then we can go through more questions about the new guidance and what exactly has changed, or maybe clarified.
Sure. Yeah, let's start with PRRC. It's the person responsible for regulatory compliance, which immediately makes it a difficult term because it's not a defined term in the regulation. So unlike, let's say, other persons or actors that the regulation addresses, the PRRC is not defined in the section with definitions. So that means that there is no, just like you would have with manufacturer or with economic operators like distributor and authorized representative, there's no definition in the MDR of what the PRRC has to be. So that's something, you can just keep looking for. So what the regulation does, it defines the person responsible for regulatory compliance in a functional way by defining the responsibilities, if you will.
So it has not maybe the definition on it, but it has a full article or full paragraph talking specifically about what it is.
Correct. Yeah, and it is, and that's what they do in the guidance. That they explain a bit more how this whole article works. It's interesting to see that it's finally one of the guidances that has finally been issued as a result, I think, of the MDCG meeting of 22 June. But weirdly enough, it's not the guidance that I would have expected to be issued from that meeting. I was expecting the software guidance, and now they come up with the PRRC and the implant card guidance.
Yeah, true. I think we need to have also another episode talking about the implant card. And for the PRRC, for me also, when I saw that, I said the article was. I mean, the text on the regulation was explaining the responsibilities and what exactly is a PRRC. But here we have, I think, more clarity, or maybe there was maybe a lot of questions, and they are trying to be answered with this guidance. Is it like that?
Yeah, that's you could say that. And I think for me, I've been advising clients in their economic operator setup quite a lot, and quality system aspects as well, quite a lot on what the PRRC should look like and how it should be operationalized in the organization. So it did not, the guidance didn't contain very much new for me, except there were just some tiny interesting things that I found quite new.
Okay.
And that was mainly related to the PRRC for the authorized representative. But we'll get to that later, because if we start at the basics, so the PRRC is person responsible for regulatory compliance. So you've got a bunch of terms. You've got person.
Yeah.
Responsible.
Okay.
And you've got regulatory compliance. So now, person, that's easy enough. It means you need somebody in your organization that is defined as attributed with this responsibility. But
it's a name. We have to have a name. We have to designate this person to say clearly that this person exist, and here is the name of the person that will take this responsibility.
Yes, and it can even be more than one person, because the regulation says it can be more persons.
Okay.
So if a number of persons are jointly responsible, then you need to stipulate in writing how that relates to each other. That's
Okay.
sort of paraphrasing. And that is also interesting because the commission, the regulation says jointly responsible. So that would indicate to me that what you can do is, if you spread out the role of PRC over multiple people, then they will still be jointly responsible.
Okay.
So,
but are we talking now about multiple people that have exactly the same responsibility, or multiple people that are getting one piece of the job and the other another piece of the job?
well, I think that's the situation that the regulation is looking at, where you say I have 4 people and together they make up the whole package of the PRRC. So that means that they are jointly responsible.
Okay.
Fine. But and that's I think clear enough. And if you do that, then you need to define in your quality system, in writing no less, how these functions relate to each other and how they basically make up the whole of the PRRC mandate.
So I can imagine something on an org chart saying PRRC 1, PRRC 2 or 3, or PRRC post-marketing surveillance, PRRC for this role, etc., etc.
Yeah, for example, but what you could also do is, and that's not a way to do it. I've also seen companies that say, okay, I just take one person, whom I nominate or appoint PRC, and then I'm going to give that person resources. So I'm going to give that person person 1, 2, 3, and 4, okay, so they can delegate their responsibilities. And then you're not actually in a situation, I think, that Article 15.4 refers to. Still, it would be stupid not to codify that in your quality system, I think, but that's another way to do it. And then I think where you get a lot of the interesting questions, or at least that's where the questions when it started for me came from, were the questions. So what do we do if we are a big international organization, a big international devices manufacturer, but we are not one manufacturer, but we are 4 manufacturers. So let's say, for example, I don't know, I'm a really big multinational company, and I acquire a bunch of companies every year. So that means that I'll have a whole bunch of manufacturers in my organization. Does it mean that I need to have one PRRC, or does each manufacturer have to have a PRRC? So that has been clarified, because the guidance says every manufacturer needs one PRRC. And that's an interesting one, because it means that if you are a bigger organization, it means that none of your manufacturers in your company can be without a PRRC. So you have to make sure that even if you, let's say I'm a big company and I acquire a small company, and I leave that company as a sort of semi-standalone in my organization for some time, then I still need to make sure that that company has a PRC.
So can we say, for example, a person works in one of the manufacturing plants and takes care of another manufacturing plant as a PRRC officially, even if he's not working specifically for this manufacturing plant? Is it something possible?
Yes, although, of course, then you go into the intention behind what a PRC does. And that is, I think, even murkier water, because if you look at the guidance, it says that you need a close linkage of permanent and continuous nature between the PRRC and the manufacturing activities.
So you can do that if you prove you are permanently in both places or something like that.
Well, yes, I think what you should be able to demonstrate. I think that at least the PRRC can be at the manufacturing facilities relatively quickly, because just like with the pharma QP, that is a lot of people are saying that this role has been sort of modeled based on that, which I think is partly true and partly not true.
So the qualified person in the pharma organization, QP, yeah.
Yeah, and a QP also does not need to be physically located in the place where the manufacturing activities take place, but you do need to show that that they can be there relatively quickly.
Okay. So in terms of this, so as we said, so we have the person, the responsible, and the regulatory compliance. So in terms of regulatory compliance, we are talking, I think, about some qualification. I think for people to really know something about that, we cannot just say this person is a PRRC just because we said that. I think there is some kind of background before you can appoint somebody as a PRRC.
That's right. Yeah, they need qualifications. Those are also set out in the regulation. And I think one of the surprises, you could say, that the guidance brought for me is how you demonstrate that your PRC actually has these qualifications.
Okay.
Because what the guidance says is that you need to demonstrate equivalence with EU qualifications.
If you are outside of EU, if you made your studies outside of EU.
Exactly. Or if you are PRRC located outside of the EU, which is allowed in the case of the manufacturer. But if you are, but let's say, for example, you're an American or a Japanese PRRC, then you cannot just assume that the fact that you did, that you have a diploma in medicine, as is required under Article 15.1a. So I have a diploma in medicine and I have 4 years of experience in regulatory affairs. Then still you need a recognition by an EU member state, or you need to prove that your diploma would be equivalent to a diploma to that effect in a member state. And this is a step I think that a lot of companies have not taken. And it's actually one of the completely underlined parts in the guidance, because the guidance contains some underlined parts. And this is a whole underlined provision. So from that, I deduct that the European Commission thinks that that is really, really important.
But for me, this is one point that I don't know. Maybe I'm too pessimistic, but I'm sure that it will not. I mean, you cannot meet this requirement for every country, for every people, for everything. It's not something really feasible. Maybe for some countries that are with the same kind of system, education system as in Europe, maybe. But for some other countries that are located in some regions that are without a lot of education, I don't think it's really possible. What do you think?
Well, I think that if you come from a country, from a region with not so much education, then it might be doubtful that you fulfill the qualifications, because these are pretty brainy studies, it's a very document-based requirement, right? I mean, it's a diploma or a certificate or other evidence of formal qualification, which is awarded upon completion of a university degree or a study recognized as equivalent by the member state concerned.
So can we say that some companies can be already disqualified from the role of medical device manufacturer as they will not have the right person in place to be the PRRC?
Well, they would not immediately be disqualified, but they would need to start a job hunt for somebody that does have the qualification. So either what they need to do is they need to double check I think, on the basis of this guidance, that the person that they are intending to appoint not only has the qualifications, but that these are also qualifications that are recognized by an EU member states as equivalent. So they need to do the additional step of checking member state equivalence.
So we said, I think if I remember well on reading this article, it says you should have a diploma or some experience. So it's also some kind of thing that people can use and say, I have enough experience, I don't need a diploma. Is it true?
Yes, it says either of the following qualifications. So you can also have 4 years of professional experience in regulatory affairs. So that's also sufficient.
So it's just showing your CV then, showing that you have worked for 4 years in this kind of field, and I think for them it will be sufficient.
Yeah, that should be sufficient, but I think if I were a notified body checking your quality system, I'd probably just to see how well people document this, I would not only ask for the CV, but I also would like to see, okay, how do you support your CV?
Exactly.
Right? How can you demonstrate that you have actually done this for 4 years?
Because I suppose that a lot of people can just mention on their CV, I work for the quality department and I have done some documentation, but it's not really what we are mentioning as experience for the role.
Well, exactly, because it says that it should be in regulatory affairs or in quality management systems relating to medical devices, and that's what the guidance clarifies, it should be related to EU requirements in the field.
Okay. So if you have worked only for FDA or only for Japanese regulation or China regulation, you have some miss, if I can say, on your qualification then.
Yeah, so let's say, for example, you've been doing China FDA for 3 years and then EU for another year, then you would not meet these qualifications.
Okay, great. So in terms of qualification, it's fine. Now, as soon as you are qualified for that, so what is your responsibility exactly? What should you take care of?
Well, that's an interesting question, because it's basically the same question with the authorized representative. Like, okay, congratulations, you're authorized representative. What are your responsibilities? And like with the authorized representative, the PRRC article says that there are certain responsibilities that the PRRC has at least. So it's like with the authorized representative, you need a mandate and certain things must be in there. Unlike the authorized representative, there is no negative list of things that are not supposed to be in there. So you could also be, a coffee distributor at the CEO's office. That's possible too. That is perfectly combinable with PRRC, it seems.
Okay.
But so there are a number of responsibilities that need to be ensured. So you need to you have a responsibility relating to batch release, checking that conformity is checked before release. Checking that the technical documentation and the EU declaration of conformity are drawn up and kept up to date, which is interesting because that's also, again, one of these things that overlaps with other economic operators, right? Because also the importer and also the distributor needs to check.
Exactly. So as I think there is a lot of cameras that are on this kind of document from every people. So it's like not just one time review, but 4, 5, 6 time reviews by a lot of operators. And one of them is the PRRC yeah. So it's also something I think the notified body has to look at. So notified body, economic operators, PRRC in the company. So yeah, it's a lot of eyes on it.
Yep. And then there's the obligation in relation to post-market surveillance, which I think is an interesting one because it's responsibility to ensure that the post-market surveillance obligations are complied with in accordance with Article 1010. So that basically ties back into the obligation to have the whole Article 83 PMS system. And that's also quite a lot, because that is actually that's a PMS system which contains the PMS plan and the whole management of all the PMS data that comes in. Where does it go? And that is, I think, where your PRRC is going to be really, really, I would say, crucial, and can really make a difference for the company, because the PRRC has a crucial role in making sure that these increased obligations under MDR PMS are actually met. And this is new for a lot of companies, because under the MDR PMS it's a dynamic thing that is very much a life cycle obligation. You could say, well, under the MDD we had that already as well, and you needed to do continuous PMS, and if you were lucky you would actually do something with the data.
Okay.
But, to paraphrase it a bit, but the MDR is very much more strict in the sense that it says you need to continuously look at the incoming data, and you need to check all the time whether these data give rise to any, for example, updates of the risk-benefit determination, whether the clinical evaluation needs to be determined, all that. And that is a process that happens on a continuous basis. So it's not something that you can do like once a year.
Yeah, so I suppose there will be also a lot of changes in the procedures in terms of frequency, in terms of who should sign, in terms of, I think a full kind of workflow process for review of documents, signature, etc. will be changed just because of this, the addition of this PRRC role, because he has to review everything and to approve everything before it's released.
Yeah, I think I agree there. And I think it also shows how important this PRRC can be in the organization, because basically they're sort of boss of data, you could say, boss of post-market data. And if I were a notified body and I would do my first quality system audit under the MDR, this is one of the places where I would go look.
Okay.
Because one of the innovations, I would say, of the MDR is that you need to have very solid processes that show that the manufacturer is like on top of all the post-market data that come in, both under general post-market surveillance and also post-market clinical follow-up, because that's part of it. So the PRRC, as a notified body, I would look like, is the PRRC really the spider in the web, if you will, that the MDR intends it to be? And that's not in the guidance, but I think this quite clearly follows from the way the MDR is set up. So this is really where I think it was there's this nice acronym that the MDR means more data, really, and this is really, the PRRC is like the spider in the web of this more data, yeah.
So I think it's a good advice maybe for some notified bodies that are listening to that to say, here is where you have to look for if you want really to check the compliance of this company.
Well, we were not ready with the functions yet, because they're also responsible for making sure that the reporting obligations are fulfilled. So okay. These are the vigilance reporting, but also other reporting, because it's all the reporting obligations in the larger PMS chapter. So that's not only vigilance, but it's also trend reporting, incidents, corrective actions reporting, all that stuff. So again, this also shows how important this PRRC is, because if you miss vigilance reporting deadlines, so incident reporting deadlines, then the PRRC is the person to blame. It seems like, or at least they need to have a role to make sure that the deadlines are met. And
so
again,
you need to have then some power to execute his job.
Well, yeah, and also he needs to be, or she needs to be able to monitor if the people that do the root cause analysis and so on are being quick enough. Because another innovation of the MDR is that it cuts the longest reporting deadline in half. And I've seen clients struggle with the 30 days already, so they are going to have a really big difficult time under 15 days.
So we come back then to the structure. So how then the person can be sure to execute correctly her job or his job inside the company? So is there kind of a good structure that or something that is obliged to put in place to have this job correctly done?
Well, there is again a negative requirement in the MDR, and that says that the position that the PRRC shall suffer no disadvantage within the manufacturer's organization in relation to the proper fulfillment of their duties, regardless of whether they are employees or not. So that means that you cannot, like they did in the X-Files, remember, where they put Mulder and Scully in a basement,
yeah,
far away from everything, and told them to be the department of shut up. Well, that's definitely not something that you can do with your with your PRRC. So the PRRC needs to be plugged into the organization in a way that you can that you can demonstrate that they can effectively fulfill their responsibilities. And I think this is where you get a quality system link, because the quality system would say if you have a role in the quality system, then the management is responsible for making sure that this person attributed with that role has the responsibilities and the means to fulfill this. And what I've sort of established for myself is that if you look at the way this could work, is that the PRRC's position in the organization could look a lot like the data protection officer under the General Data Protection Regulation. Mm-hmm. Because that's a similar kind of function attributed by European law in an organization to infuse quality thinking, or you could also say to enforce it on management. And and I think companies can, they can get a lot of inspiration from how the data protection officers implemented in the company. To see how you would do that with the PRRC. Because if the PRRC is responsible for certain things, then it means that there has to be an auditable trail that the person has been doing stuff in that light. So that means that you need to have at least software or processes that make sure that any communication and actions and so on by the PRRC are logged in a way that they can be audited afterwards, right? You cannot use your Gmail address for it and then mistakenly delete it and then say, oh well, sorry, the whole audit trail is gone.
That's clear. That's really clear. So I think it's really well written on paper, but to have that in reality, it can be a challenge for some organization or some people that will be on this role as PRRC. So it's it's something that as I said, it's good on paper, but I'm not confident that it can be easily executed in reality.
No, and it's also, of course, going to upset an organization because either you appoint somebody new or you shuffle people around. And of course, how this typically goes in organizations is that somebody is appointed like, okay, you are PRRC and you're going to do it in your spare time because you're not getting a raise, you're not getting extra resources, and for sure you're not getting additional time or something for this. Or so, yeah, that's probably the way not to do it. Because what you would want is that if your notified body comes and audits, that you can actually show that PRRC has been doing meaningful stuff. Because otherwise, as a notified body, I would give you a non-conformity on enabling the PRRC to meet the responsibilities.
No, it's clear. One thing also that I wanted to ask is about liability. So we have a PRRC that is here to control everything. If something is going wrong, is the PRRC liable, or is it the company, or who is really responsible for that?
Well, that's a good question. That depends on several factors. Because first of all, the MDR itself doesn't say anything.
Okay.
It only says that the PRRC shall suffer no disadvantage for fulfilling for proper fulfillment of their duties. So as a lawyer, then of course I immediately start to think of evil things like, can we put an enormous penalty in the contract of the PRRC, like if you cry wolf, so we implement the corrective action because you say it's a good idea, or because you stop production because you refuse to sign a batch release. This will cost the company 5 million, so well, that comes out of your salary. Would that be contrary to making sure that they don't suffer any disadvantage? I think that probably is. Normally, employees of a company are not liable externally if they fulfill their role within the scope of their employment mandate. So that's good. But then you get into weirder territory, because member states are allowed to, under the MDR, to define what sanctions and penalties they impose on contravention of articles of the MDR. And as I wrote in my blog about the PRRC guidance, my member state, the Netherlands, they do a lot for the MDR, I think. They managed to finish the whole trilogue. They are doing a lot in the implementation, but they also are not always super smart, I think, in the way they've implemented the regulation, because the Dutch implementing legislation, that's actually almost finished. It can be adopted any moment. So then, as far as I know, we will be the first country to have in member state in Europe to have the MDR implementation regulation ready. But what did they put in this implementing legislation? Yes, the competent authority can issue a fine, or they can start enforcement, or they can impose a penalty payment for compelling somebody to comply. For contravention of, and then they mention a whole bunch of articles, among others, Article 15.3 of the MDR and the IVDR. And Article 15.3, that is the article that's the section of Article 15 of the PRRC article that says the person responsible for regulatory compliance shall at least be responsible for ensuring that. So, contravention of this. So let's say that the I'm going to go on an unannounced holiday for 2 months. And that means that I am definitely not available in the organization during those times. But that is a problem of the manufacturer, because that's Article 15.1. But on the other hand, I'm not signing any batch releases, for example. And does that mean that I, as a PRRC, am contravening Article 15.3? Or is my manufacturer contravening Article 15.3? We don't know.
So it means that when you read that, it looks like the PRRC will not have the rights to go on holidays at all. He will have to stay there to do all his job and to sign everything. Because reading that, it looks like if he's not here, he cannot sign battery, so he stop production. It's meaning like that.
That shows how important it is to have a replacement. I mean, I don't know if you read. I think there was last week there was an article of this Spanish medicines manufacturer that lost their GMP certificate because their their QP was, or their GMP officer was on sick leave and they didn't have a replacement. Well, this is exactly the same thing. And that also shows, I think, how much of these procedures you can also borrow from for example, the pharmaceutical field, but also from the data protection field. I've also been in a transaction recently where a medical devices company was taken over, and I found in the data room that the data protection officer was on pregnancy leave. So I asked, okay, so who is the data protection officer then? Yeah, nobody. Okay, guys, this is illegal. You know that. No, that can't be. Yeah, well, it is. So that also shows that even for a PRRC, you need to have a replacement procedure, or even in case of temporary replacement. Yeah. To go back to liability, so we've got the crazy Dutch that have put a very spectacularly unclear enforcement provision in their law. That's for, you could say, a regulatory liability. So can they be fined or enforced against? And then, of course, there's also the question of civil liability. So liability under tort, or in case of an outsourced PRRC, liability under contract, right? Because if you have an outsourced PRRC, the PRRC can also be outsourced for micro and small manufacturers and for authorized representatives. Let's say, for example, I have an outside consultant that shows up drunk every time that they show up as PRRC, and then they get their records wrong. Well, that would typically be a case of liability in contract, right? But it can also even be that you are in a situation that one of these situations, one of the nevermore situations of the MDR, you have a manufacturer that is deliberately producing medical devices that are different from the certificates, like happened with PIP. So let's say, for example, I don't know. You have let's make it really scary and freaky. Okay. You have a heart valve producer that does not use the porcine tissue that has been checked under the separate regulation for animal tissue in medical devices, but they are buying their stuff straight from the slaughterhouse in another member state because it's much cheaper. Right, that would be like a prima facie PIP situation, and you've got all these patients with infections in their heart and quite terrible, dying by the dozens. So, and then it turns out that the PRRC has been forging batch release records all the time. Now, that could be a situation where you could say, okay, well, maybe this PRRC is also liable to the damaged patients because of tort, because they were deliberately misrepresenting records in order to commit fraud in the company. So that might actually, and if they were also not told to do that by management, let's say because they had their own business in buying this porcine material, yeah, then you would really be looking at external tort liability as well.
So I can imagine, yeah, it's really the circumstances that will tell you really who is really responsible, liable, and if, as I say, if the PRRC is doing his job right and really do what is on his responsibility, but something happened at the end, it's really the investigation that will show if he has any responsibility on that. But if they are doing that on purpose, then we have it's the normal law for any person. So then they can be liable and be going to jail. So for consultants, one question I have is, it says that those people should be permanently and continuously available. Yeah. So how can I do that? I mean, it's consultants, they are not working specifically for me. So how can I do that?
Well, what you can do is what you basically need is a service level in the contract with the consultant that says I am always available if you need me.
Okay.
So what you cannot do, for example, is have a contract that says every last 2 days of the month I am available for PRRC work for this company. That would not be allowed. So what you can do is you can of course do work in cycles. That is allowed, but you cannot say I can only respond to things on the last 2 days of the month, for example. That would be wrong.
So it's the same also for consultants. If some consultants if the PRRC that was appointed for this company is going on holiday, he has also to have a deputy or backup at the company to still continue the business.
Yes.
So for that, we have that also with the authorized representative. He can also hire consultants, not obliged to have somebody on site, and also hire a consultant to be the PRRC for his company. But is there a PRRC for the authorized representative and also for the manufacturer outside of EU? So do we have two PRRC for the same organization?
Yes, because these are two things I think are also interesting from the guidance, and that is that the PRRC of the manufacturer and of the authorized representative cannot be the same person.
Okay.
Which I've been saying to companies from the start because it would be weird. It would be a conflict of interest because you know that the authorized representative under the MDR, even more than under the MDD, has been recruited to snoop on the manufacturer for the authorities.
Yeah.
So if you are going to combine these roles, then you create immediately create a conflict of interest. And then I think that's also an interesting one that the guidance clarifies, which also not everybody was 100% agreeing on, is where should the authorized representative for the PRRC be? Because you see with foreign companies that have an authorized representative, they traditionally would like the authorized representative to be a letterbox as much as possible, because they will control it out of the US, out of Japan, out of China, wherever. And they are really not so happy now that PRRC for the AR must be located in the EU.
Yeah. And the other one should be located at the company. So is there a control done by the notified bodies about both PRRC?
Yeah, because I would say this is quality system requirement.
So you have, they have to check that there is a PRRC at the manufacturer and that there is a PRRC at the authorized representative. So they have to check both name, both qualification, etc., etc.
I would say so, yeah. Yeah, except that with the interesting difference that the PRRC of the manufacturer has an open-ended job description with 5 elements that he must be responsible for at least, because we discussed before, we didn't discuss the PRRC responsibilities for the clinical investigation devices, but that's not a responsibility. And then he can have other responsibilities as well, like I jokingly said, be the person that distributes coffee. But the AR, the authorized representative PRRC, does not have any defined responsibilities, which is kind of interesting.
Okay.
Because then, of course, the big question is, so what is the authorized representative's PRRC supposed to do, right? Do they have a particular role? Because then the only thing you have to go by is should the authorized representative for the PRRC for the authorized representative, should he mirror the manufacturer PRRC's responsibilities? Well, I don't think so, because it would be kind of weird if the authorized representative's PRRC would be doing batch checking, for example. Exactly. It would be kind of strange. or that they, but on the other hand, there could also be overlap, because what you can do, and that some manufacturers do that, is they outsource vigilance reporting to the authorized representative. And vigilance reporting, as we discussed, is actually one of the responsibilities of the authorized representative. So that means that where then you get into quite interesting quality system things at authorized representative level, where I think authorized representatives need to be mindful of. Because you cannot just say, well, you would need separation, I think, between if the authorized representative is doing, let's say, vigilance work, then that happens under the PRRC of the manufacturer, and the PRRC of the authorized representative should actually stay away from that. There should be a Chinese wall between the authorized representatives PRRC and the people in the manufacturer's quality system that are at the authorized representative doing vigilance reporting.
So I think there is a lot of things that are still, I think there is a lot of things that we'll still continue to discover with this role when it will go live, and we'll see maybe some creativity, some things that people are trying to see how we can trick the system, or see how we can put that in place, or even put something in place thinking that it's the right thing to do, but at the end it will not. But I think we have still some discovery on that topic.
I completely agree with you. I see a lot of companies treat it as a bit of a box-checking exercise at the moment, but we'll need to see when we've had the first quality system audits. And I'm already getting the first complaints from clients about notified bodies. Well, there's two MDR accredited now that are doing the first MDR quality system check work. And I mean, sometimes things happen where you think like, okay, yeah, that's also a way to look at it. So notified bodies are creative as well, I find.
Okay, so interpretation is on the way. So Erik, you had also made this blog post related to PRRC, so on your website, so medicaldeviceslegal.com. So I encourage really people also to go there and to read what you wrote on that. I think it's mirroring a bit of what we discussed today, but with also a lot of references and comments to that. So and you were also, I think, active in other topics on your blog, so I think people can also go and read a bit of your thinking about what's happening now on the updates in terms of the regulation. Okay, Erik, so I think it was a great episode with the PRRC. So Erik Vollebregt, a lawyer at the Axon firm. So thank you for your help. Thank you for all the information you provided. For the audience, so don't forget to subscribe to the podcast. Don't forget also to provide some reviews on your preferred platform, so Apple, Google Podcasts, Stitcher. It will be really helping me, so thank you for that. And don't forget also to go to the website, so easymedicaldevice.com, to get more information and the last blog post that we have that I have released. So thank you for that. So Erik, thank you very much, and I wish you a nice day.
Thank you too. Have a nice day, Meneer.
Bye-bye.
Bye.